This week on Caribbean Vibrations, we discuss the effects of dementia in the Black community. Ngozi Iroanyah, Manager of Diversity and Community Partnerships at the Alzheimer Society of Canada, joins us for an in-depth conversation about dementia, answering several questions including, what is dementia? What are the signs and symptoms? And how does dementia affect the Black community directly? Stay tuned for this insightful, informative episode that can help you better understand experiencing dementia, as well as how to cope with loved ones living with the disease. Right now on Caribbean Vibrations. You are watching Caribbean Vibrations, and today we're coming to you from the Alzheimer Society of Canada. And we're speaking with Ms. Ngozi Iroanyah, Manager of Diversity and Community Partnerships. How are you doing today?
I'm great, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. Now, Black Canadians have experienced higher rates of chronic disease such as diabetes, hypertension, and cardiovascular disease. But there's another disease that's having a profound effect on our community in a different way, and that's dementia. So to help us get a further grasp on this disease, we're speaking today with Ms. Ngozi. Since you and I connected, I want you to tell us about your story and how you've been affected by dementia.
Absolutely. My father was diagnosed with dementia in 2007 by his family doctor. Now, my father is a naturalized citizen of Canada from Nigeria. He came in 1970 and has been here for many, many years. And actually, he got into a car accident in the 1980s, which he was in a coma for about 8 days. Now, when he got into the car accident, he hit the front of his head. And I remember, as I got older, my mother had said to us that the doctor had told her, be careful as he ages, you might see some changes. And we did in fact see that. In about 2006, 2005, we saw some changes in his behavior, in his speech pattern, is his ability to sort of think and make decisions. And so we took him to the doctor to get a diagnosis, and which we did. And it was actually very fortunate that we did at that time. Getting the early diagnosis, I think, really helped him and our family. We were able to get him the right supports and interventions and put him on the right drugs, which helped to, I would say, slow the progression of the disease. So now it's 2023. My father is still with us, God willing, and he's at end-stage dementia now, but we've been living with dementia as a family for about 15, 16 years now.
It's very interesting. And for a lot of our viewers, and even myself, we don't know a lot about dementia. So what is dementia and what are the types of dementia?
Absolutely. So dementia itself it's an umbrella term, and it categorizes sort of cognitive decline within the brain. As the umbrella term, dementia, there's different kinds of dementia. So there's Alzheimer's, which was the most popular or most known type of dementia. There's also Lewy body dementia. There's vascular dementia. There's frontotemporal dementia, which is what Bruce Willis recently announced with his family just a few weeks ago. So there's different forms of dementia, but the one that people tend to be most familiar with is Alzheimer's.
Very interesting. Now, last month you actually had a roundtable, which I really did enjoy. It was an experience of dementia in the Black community. It was a cross-section of different medical practitioners. You guys had amazing knowledge. And one of the things I learned there was there's actually a component to dementia that's directed to our community, the Black community, and there's certain factors that could actually contribute to that. Can you explain to us what that is?
Yeah, and so the answer to that question is a little bit, I'm going to break it down a little bit. So within dementia research in Canada, let's start off within Canada, there isn't a lot known about dementia in the Black community. Experiences, prevalence, incidence rates, clinical trials, we don't have that information in Canada. So the research is lacking. We're trying to make changes, and we'll talk about that later on. In the States, in America and the UK, there's a lot more information about dementia in the Black community. So what we have seen from those two locations is that dementia disproportionately affects the Black community than Latin, Asian, and white populations. I think it's more on par with indigenous populations across any region. But within the Black community itself, when you look about the Black community compared to visible minority communities, Black communities disproportionately are affected by dementia for a variety of reasons. Some are biological. There's still a lot of conversations around biomarkers within the Black community or genetic component and predisposition to dementia, but largely you can attribute that to social determinants of health. And social determinants of health, they are non-medical factors that impact your health status and impact your ability to acquire better health. So things like housing, things like education, employment, racism, etc. Within the Black community writ large, we experience disproportionate burdens of those conditions, which contribute to pronounced risk factors for getting dementia. So things like racism, for example, we talked about this in the talk last week. So there's an effect called the weathering effect. And so the weathering effect talks about how prolonged exposure to racism or racist acts actually has a change in the brain. It actually has a structural change in the brain in your hippocampal region, which is where you store your memories. So it actually impacts the way in which your brain can actually store your memories and recall them for you. We've also found within the Black community or communities that experience higher rates of racism, your brain can actually shrink a bit more and your brain ages faster than other populations. All that's just one component, contributes to cognitive decline at faster rates than other populations and at earlier rates than other populations. Within the Black community, we have seen in the research in other countries that we tend to get diagnosed later in the dementia journey, but we can experience dementia earlier in life. Now, dementia itself, we understand that we see it more in the older populations. It is not exclusively a condition facing older people, older adults. You can have dementia in your 50s, in your 40s, in your 30s, and younger. However, within the Black population, we do tend to see it younger than 65, but we will get diagnosed with it later as it has progressed within us, which makes it a little bit harder for interventions, a lot more burden on the family in terms of caregiving duties and balancing out those duties with other life demands. I remember we were sitting around the table and the OT was talking about some of the things that my father would need now and in the future. And my father said, what is this for? What is this for? And the OT said to him, "Oh, sir, don't you know you have dementia?" We had told him, he had forgotten. He said, you have dementia. And my father's face got really, he said, "Oh." And then he said, "And will I ever get better?" And he looked at the OT and the OT was sort of like, "No." My father got really sullen again. And a few minutes later, he looked back at the OT and he said, "Will I ever get better?" And the OT looked at me and I grabbed my father's hand. I held his hand across the table and I said, "No, Daddy, but we're going to be here with you." And I think for me, that's when it hit me, when he asked the second time, right after, and the look on his face. I think for me, that's when it hit that this is what we're going to be dealing with for the next little bit.
Now, when I was watching the seminar, one of the things you talked about was actual signs and symptoms. Can you explain that to us, please?
Yeah, and so, when my father was diagnosed, we noticed a significant change in his behavior. He was always a very outgoing and gregarious sort of individual, but he just had a little bit of trouble in terms of abstract thinking. So there's a lot of signs and symptoms we can talk about, but I want to just preface a couple of them that I think might be significant for some people. One is we understand that a sign is memory loss, right? Not being able to recall things as easily or quickly or in much detail. There's a few others. One is lack of abstract thinking and impaired judgment. So abstract thinking, how numbers and symbols can have different meaning, right? So for example, if you have a checkbook and you're writing out a check, sometimes if you experience dementia, you may forget what the numbers sort of mean and sort of what the significance of that is. Impaired judgment. So, seeing your loved one who might be in their 50s or 60s walking out of the house on a cold day without a jacket and thinking that's a good idea to do. language difficulties, being able to communicate or lack thereof, right? So sometimes people with dementia, they might forget a word and try to substitute that word, or they might forget a whole sequence of sentences, or repetitive conversations, saying the same thing over and over and over again. So you may have a conversation, and then maybe 5 minutes later they repeat the same thing. And then maybe a day later they're repeating the same thing. Another is wayfinding, not being able to find your way. So sort of that space and that time and space and just sort of that configuration, sort of not knowing it or not having a firm grasp of it. So for example, getting lost on the way home, when they normally would not get lost on the way home. Changes in mood, changes in behavior, changes in personality. Sometimes people with dementia can feel depressed, withdrawn, lack of motivation, lack of initiative. And sometimes you can attribute that to just they're getting older, they're just depressed, and that could be, it can be indicative of something else as well. So those are some really big ones that I tell people to sort of be on the watch out for others. You know, it might just be they're having a bad day, maybe they're going through something in their own personal life, or it might be indicative of something else. So it's always good to pay attention to that.
Well, that's good, because there's some of those things that you see that you might not realize is a part of something bigger. And I also think for our community, there's always, even when I was growing up, there's a stigma with dementia. Like, how do we deal with that?
Yeah, it's funny enough, when my father was diagnosed, we faced a lot of stigma within our community and our family, not our immediate family, but our more extended family. People were saying, oh, you know, he's just old, he'll be fine, and kind of dismissing or trying to erase or trying to even just not make it as significant as it was for the family. And, you know, within a lot of cultural communities, the Black community is no exception, talking about older people and mental health can be very scary, right? Dementia is not necessarily a mental health disease or condition, but people can frame it in a mental health way. And when we talk about mental health, there's a stigma as, oh, something's wrong with them, they're crazy, they're senile, etc. I've talked to other people, and you know, coming from different diasporas of the Black community, people have attached a cultural, a religious component to it. That sometimes, you know, oh, you were bad in a past life, you were sinful, you know, you've done something wrong, someone's put a curse on your family, etc. So all of these, a lot of these sort of dialogues and conversations around dementia can really isolate families who are going through it, make people feel that they have to sort of experience it alone, away from everybody else, and that is not the case. It doesn't have to be that way. And so I always talk to people about dementia and try to break down some of their fears around it. When you talk about dementia, people think, oh, I'm going to get old, it's going to happen to me. So there's a lot of fear, a lot of stigma, a lot of sometimes myths and confusions around what dementia is or isn't, and how it can impact a family.
But how, when you get to that situation, that person's changed, how can they be capable caregivers, and what other information can you give to our viewers about dementia and dealing with it, their family?
Again, you know, a lot of people have come to me in recent years, and they have said, you know, oh, my loved one has dementia, my friend's family has dementia. And I think to myself, where is everybody? Everyone's at home. They're sort of trying to handle it and balance it themselves. And the burden can be enormous, right? Especially if you're in that, we call it a sandwich generation, whereby you have children, young ones at home, and you have aging parents, and you have, you know, a job and other responsibilities, and how do you balance it all? And so, and it's really difficult because within our community, sort of writ large, we are a diverse community, a Black community, but writ large we have some patterns that we see, one of which is taking care of our family, right? In our community, we don't tend to put our loved ones in a nursing home. We tend to have our mothers and fathers close at hand, right? Our grandparents close at hand, and we tend to have a communal approach to caring for people. So when you talk about, oh, take time for yourself and do self-care, people will say, no, I gotta take care of my loved one. I have to, you know, take care of them. As someone who's been on the journey for many years, self-care is very important. If you can't take care of yourself or you don't, you will burn out. And if you burn out, you cannot help the ones that you love at all. I encourage people to get out and to do things that invigorate them again, however small it may be. If it's going for a walk around the neighborhood for 20 minutes, if it's, you know, if you can find time to go to the gym or do something active for yourself, connecting with friends, connecting with loved ones, connecting with other people is also very important as a caregiver. And there are formalized services as well in institutions. The Alzheimer Society of Canada, we do have an info line that can connect people to resources and services around the country, so not just within Ontario where we are based. There's also day programs at the Alzheimer Societies in regional pockets as well. So there are many ways in which caregivers can support themselves and support each other. There are workshops and support groups as well, counseling. I cannot stress how much counseling is very, very vital. Finding a trusted counselor to help you understand what is happening within your family, within yourself, within your loved one, and to help guide you through some of the changes of the progression of the disorder. I always wondered if people know that they have dementia in the later stages. I guess we'll never know, but I know that he feels love when we are all around him. You could see his reaction to us when we hug him, when we talk to him, when we smile and laugh with him. His bodily responses, I would say, he knows that there's love there.
Now, we've talked a lot about how this disease is affecting people, but is there a way to prevent dementia?
Yeah, when we think about ways in which we can slow the progression of dementia or delay the onset of dementia, there are a few things that we can do to sort of fortify ourselves against it. Typically, as we get older, we think that and many people have said to me they like reading a good book as they get older. And it was actually my dad's geriatrician who said to me that your father needs to be around people. He needs not to be socially isolated and just reading by himself all the time. Talking with people, engaging in people is very important for the brain as it ages. So making sure that you're not socially isolated, that you're not excluded from society, getting out, talking to people. Another one is exercise, movement. It doesn't have to be extenuous. It could be going for a walk, some light movements. Challenging your brain, learning new hobbies is also a good one as well to keep your brain strong. This is all about healthy brains and healthy brain aging, as it were. Reducing alcohol, reducing nicotine intake, I know. I like my glass of wine too. But just being moderate to low drinking as you get older. Proper eating, a heart-healthy diet and a brain-healthy diet. Coconut oil, fish oils, less processed food, etc. And as well, just less stress where you can find it. I know it's hard in our community. I think one of the reasons in our community why we don't talk about dementia is because we're so focused on living right now, and we're focused on surviving and trying to get through stressful events. But finding ways to keep your mind and your body less stressed out will be much more beneficial as we age. So I don't want to say a general health and wellness type of approach, but certainly doing things to strengthen your brain, new hobbies, social interaction, good diet, and healthy lifestyle, I think is very, very important for us, especially as we age.
Your experience dealing with this, if someone is now entering into it where a family member has dementia, what kind of personal advice can you give to them on how they can cope?
Yeah. Coping with dementia is understanding dementia. It can be a long journey. They call dementia the long goodbye for a reason. And I found for myself, knowing as much as I could know about dementia, arming myself with knowledge, being able to talk to the healthcare providers, being able to engage with the healthcare system in a way that's going to benefit not just my father, but also my family as well. And from that, you have to engage. You have to engage. Experiencing it in silence is not going to be as supportive for anyone as they would need it to be supportive. And there's a few things, it's kind of a twofold question in my mind when I answer it, because there's also the things that we can do, and there's also the things that institutions need to do as well, right? It is a collaborative effort when anyone experiences dementia in their community. It requires the community members and the community itself to come together. And so to that, I want to talk about a couple of things that the Alzheimer Society of Canada is doing in this space, specifically for Black communities as well for other racialized communities as well. So one thing that we're developing is the national guidelines. And so it's a little bit of a preamble to that. Back in 2020, we developed the National Dementia Journey Survey. And that survey was looking at how people living with dementia were experiencing their healthcare providers when they went to see them for dementia-related issues. What was that relationship looking like? Because there was a survey done in 2015 that said that family doctors were sort of trepid on making dementia diagnoses. Now, within the general population, that's difficult, but as I said before, within Black populations, we get a diagnosis later on in the progression. So it's very important that we are aware and get an early diagnosis. And so the Dementia Journey Survey was meant to understand what that relationship looked like between people living with dementia and their healthcare providers and what those gaps were. And so my role was at that point to support different cultural communities in taking the survey to understand what was happening in those communities, to make sure that we weren't missing anything. The results of that have led to what we're now doing with the National Dementia Guidelines. Now, these guidelines are going to be supporting family doctors in being able to make a better diagnosis. And so we're looking at two communities to start off. One is the Black community, the other is the Chinese community. So we're developing out these guidelines now with community members as part of our project design to figure out what we're missing, what's happening, what the gaps are, what do community want healthcare providers to know for them to have a better experience and a better, I don't want to say a better time with dementia, but a less burdensome journey. And so that's one thing that we're doing. These guidelines are going to be developed and distributed across the country for other family physicians as well. We're also developing, I'm very excited to talk about a BRAID program. The BRAID program is a new research initiative where we're going to be supporting racialized students and academics to conduct dementia research in Canada. And as well, we're providing some support for community organizations who want to conduct dementia research. Because I said before, there's not a lot when it comes to dementia research of racialized communities in the country. Black populations, there is not. I think there's only 1 or 2 studies done at all in Canada. Other racialized populations, there's not a lot either. And so one of the ways to bridge that gap is to fund people from within community to do work within their community. Because we're not going to get anywhere without knowing first what's happening, what people are experiencing, what people need. And from that, we can build out more programs, more policy that's more directed and inclusive of these experiences and these populations. So these are just a couple of things that we're doing here at the Alzheimer Society of Canada to ensure that we're bridging the gap for Black Canadians and for other Canadians as well, to ensure that we're going to get the best dementia services moving forward.
Now, Ngozi, is there anything else you'd like to tell our Caribbean Vibration viewers about the Alzheimer Society of Canada?
Yes, I would. I want to let our viewers know that if you are experiencing dementia or you know someone who's experiencing dementia and you need some support, please do reach out to the Alzheimer Society of Canada. We have our info line there. The number is 1-855-705-INFO. That's 1-855-705-INFO. They'll be happy to connect you with resources and services in your area to provide you the support that you need. You do not have to go through dementia alone, and you are not alone on this journey. If you need any more support, we're also at alzheimers.ca. Our information is right there, and please do connect with us should you need any support.
Awesome. It was a pleasure sitting here talking to you, learning about this thing that's affecting our community, and you are a plethora of knowledge.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
My pleasure. And you're watching Caribbean Vibrations. Thanks for watching Caribbean Vibrations. Follow us on social media at CaribVibe or visit our website, CaribbeanVibrationsTV.com. I'm your host and guide, Alan, and we'll see you next time on Caribbean Vibrations.